Well, welcome back. I decided to do another video. I don't really have a purpose in like I did with the last one with reviewing a new product. This is more of just contributing to the wealth of knowledge to the brewing community that's on YouTube. I feel like most of what I've learned for brewing has come from YouTube, has come from other home brewers, and I thought, well, I really just like to give back, and maybe there's something someone else can learn from some of the little things that I do that would help their brew day. What's been going on in the last year and a half? I have continued to brew. That batch was batch number 48. I am going to talk about today batch number 79. Since my last batch, I've used the brew bag every time, whether it is a traditional brew in a bag batch or mash in a bag, or the 1 gallon batches I do in a 3 gallon pot on my stovetop. I have used the brew bag for every single batch. I went to HomebrewCon in 2017 in Minneapolis. I got a chance to meet Rex there and talk to him about, I think he saw this video and we discussed his product. I've won more medals in local competitions. I won 2 more golds and 2 silvers. I have upgraded some of my equipment. I got a 15 gallon spike brew kettle shortly after that last video, and really the idea of brew in a bag drove me to get a 15 gallon kettle. That has been the way I have brewed the vast majority of my batches now, is traditional brew in a bag in that 15 gallon pot, 5 gallon batches, starting at 7.5 gallons, boiling to 6, 5.5 in the fermenter, 5 into the keg. The 15 gallon kettle leaves me plenty of headspace and room to do big high gravity batches if I want to. I also got just recently got an SS Brewtech 7 gallon brew bucket that I have yet to use. That'll be coming this Saturday. But today I'm going to be doing something I've not yet done. We are going to be doing an overnight mash. I just settled on doing this after a recent experiment on Brewlosophy where Brian Hall tried an overnight mash, and I thought this is a perfect opportunity to do that. I'm always looking for ways to shorten my brew day or move parts of my brew day to other days. With my 2 small children, it is really difficult to dedicate a full 5-6 hours, whatever, to brewing. It's easier if I can break it up over the course of several days. I also have a lot of hops now. I got a lot at Christmas, 5 more pounds from what I had from last year. I hadn't used all of that up. So I decided to do a big double IPA in order to clear out a lot of that. And in fact, I had originally titled this Clean Out the Freezer Double IPA. We'll be changing the name of that because of what happens, but that was the idea. That's the inspiration here. I decided to go with a grain bill based on the Big Mac IPA Ray founded. His Mac IPA, he did a big imperial version of that in one of the experiments. I'll post a link to that experiment in the description as well. The hops, though, came from what I just had a lot of. But even though this is about clearing out my freezer and freeing up some hop space, I did not go about this haphazardly, so I'll post a link to the Brewer's Friend recipe that I came up with for this. It is predominantly 007, the golden hop, or what was formerly Idaho 7, but also some Cascade and Simcoe in there as well. You can probably hear some of those small children right now. Oh, here's batch number 78, an English mild I did that came out remarkably well as well. Well, enough talking, enough intro. Let's get to brewing. So this brew day begins before I go to work, collecting all of my brewing water through my reverse osmosis water filter I just got at Christmas. I set my heat stick to turn on with this mechanical timer 3 hours before I got off of work, so that by the time I got off is nice and hot, and my strike water is where I needed it to be to begin my mash. I overshot the temperature a little bit, but that's fine. It gives me time to go and mill my grain while I'm waiting for it to cool off. I still go for a really fine crush on my grain, but I've found that I guess the rollers, the little knobs on the rollers have worn off enough that I have to do a double crush. So you can see here's the second one going through. It doesn't add too much more time, but once I do that second round, you can see I get exactly what I was looking for, this pulverized flour. I used the Brew and Water spreadsheet to help me figure out how much lactic acid to add to get to pH of 5.4 and to the mineral profile you see up there, favoring sulfates. This is the exact same bag as in my last video, so it fit my old 8.5 gallon kettle. It also fits this mash tun and even the new 15 gallon kettle I got. By then it took only a little bit of stirring to get my strike water down to about 156. I have stuck with just dumping the grain straight in and then stirring afterwards. With that fine of a crush, it doesn't really cause too many dough balls, and then I switched from a spoon over to this 24-inch whisk, and that blasts right through them. I was shooting for a mash temperature of 149, but 148.5, good enough. I did spring for the mash temperature stabilizer on this SS Brewtech mash tun, so I'm going to set it for 149 degrees and begin my first and only so far overnight mash. And I wake up the next morning, come on out. My mash temperature stabilizer still says 149, so it appears to have done its job. But then I take the lid off and I give it a good stir and check it with my thermopen, and you can see it has dropped a lot. So there's definitely some hot and cold spots in that mash. Eventually it comes up a little bit, and I'll call it 142. But then when you look at the mash temperature stabilizer, it's still reading a lot higher than that, so I don't really trust the accuracy on that thing. This is my 15-gallon spiked brew kettle that I got just after I made that last video. I'm doing a first wort hopping of 17 grams of Columbus and 1 ounce of Summit for my bittering. Next, I hook my bag up to the pulley. I did switch out that little S-hook for a carabiner. That helps a lot. But I lift it up and then I squeeze the bag. So whether I'm doing like mash in a bag or very traditional brew in a bag, I continue to squeeze the bag every time now. I found I often skip the iodine test these days, but I always do a quick refractometer reading just to make sure I'm about where I want to be. Just a quick view of what's going on behind me here in Juneau, Alaska. You can see why I try to do most of my mashing inside. I'm just getting through the hot break here, and I chose to do a shorter boil. We're just doing 30 minutes today. I added 1.25 pounds of just regular white table sugar at 10 minutes remaining. And then at 5 minutes left, 1 ounce of Cascade, Simcoe, and 2 ounces of 007, or what used to be called Idaho 7. I then brought it inside and chilled it down to about 185 there. And then I'm going to do a bit of a Whirlpool addition. 1.5 ounces of Cascade, Simcoe, and 3 ounces of 007. And then I'm going to cover it up with a piece of sanitized foil and let it sit for the 15 minutes. I continue to agitate and chill it down until I finally get to room temperature, 65 there. With that many hops in the boil, I tried to do a really good whirlpool. Got it spinning really fast and let it sit for another 15 minutes, but you can see just in trying to take the hydrometer sample, I just try to open it a little bit, and you can see, boom, it clogs already. Open it a little more, clogs again. I have to open the thing about wide open just to get the hydrometer sample, so it's already clogging with hops. Gravity was about 5 points higher than I expected, and you can see it remains the same even after I let it settle. Just looking in the top of the kettle, you can see how much hop debris is in here. I went from halfway to having to open it up all the way again to stop the ball valve from clogging. At the end, look how much is in there. So a lot more lost to trub and hops than I'm used to. Got only about, I'm calling it 5.25 gallons there. On the last beer, I know I did agitation for aeration, but this is a much bigger beer, so I went for the Puro 2 route on this one. About 1.5 minutes of that. Then I hooked it up in my fermentation chamber, a deep freezer with a heat belt.
and set my thermostat to 19.5 C or 67 F. Right before pitching a lot of Danstar Nottingham ale yeast, I checked to see how much the True Blair had compacted, and you can still see that's pretty significant. And then, about 18 hours after I had pitched the yeast, I noticed I had a real problem. I checked this right before I went in for a very early morning shift. I'm glad I did. So after I noticed it, I did a quick blow-off tube, and then felt a little bit better about going to work. The next day, things had slowed down a little bit, but you can sort of make out that it's still bubbling away. Day 9, just before adding dry hops, I just got a shot of the True Blair, which is compacted but still big. Dry hop charge was pretty significant. Ounce of Cascade, ounce of Simcoe, 3 ounces of 007. I did add a bit of gelatin, mainly just to get the hop debris out of solution. And then a few days later, I'm racking it over into the keg. You can see I put a hop sock around the siphon to keep it from clogging. There's my daughter standing next to the carboy after siphoning. You could see how much trub was in this one. It's just a massive amount. And then came the final gravity reading, which I really was not expecting. It fermented all the way out to 1.006.
Well, there it is. What I intended to be a double IPA, maybe starting about 1085 or so and attenuating out, I don't know, 1015 or something, ended up 1090. I was a little surprised but not shocked at that. It's the 1006 that really threw me. That attenuated far more than I expected it would. I guess I attribute that to the overnight mash. In the experiment Brian Hall did, it looked like the only real noticeable changes that the overnight mash may have caused was an increase in fermentability and a decrease in head retention, which at 11% we're not going to get great head retention in the first place, but I haven't really noticed there being an issue with that. We also did a 30-minute boil. That doesn't seem to have affected anything. The hops jump out of the glass. I guess you'd expect that with, a pound of hops, but it is quite strong. I get a strong orange marmalade character I'm used to getting from the 007 if you've never tried that. But it actually plays pretty well with the Simcoe and the Cascade. I had read in higher amounts that you could get some dank, resinous type flavor from the 007 hops, and I definitely get that. Wow. But seeing as how we ended up with a far stronger beer than I intended, I have changed the name from, what was I going to call it? Clean Out the Freezer Double IPA to One and Done Triple IPA. I have yet to have a full pint of this. I've given away some bottles to friends, and they were the ones that inspired One and Done. It was fantastic, but that's it. It is so good. In fact, I really wish there was a competition locally where I could submit this and see how it does. It uses so many hops that I don't know that I would ever recreate it, but it's kind of nice when you throw something together like this and it ends up being just a fantastic beer. I was noticing when I was editing the intro to the video that I definitely look like I have an obsession with the Alaskan brewery, so I made sure I changed my sweatshirt for the end of this. I really do enjoy the beer, and the brewery's right down the road here in town, but I like it as much as many other breweries. Family shows up into town and says, "Hey, you just put a bar in. Hey, I'd like to get some stuff to decorate. These things look nice," and there you go. That's how they happened. At 10:06, a conventional wisdom would also tell you this should be a super dry beer. That's about where I'd want to saison to finish out. Maybe an American light lager if I was going to do one of those. I wouldn't. But it is not a dry beer. So I have had just experience with different final gravities. I tend to mash very hot, so I tend to have a higher final gravities. Final gravity doesn't seem to have a flavor contribution to me. This is squarely a super hoppy, double, sort of triple IPA, I guess. So anyways, I hope this was helpful for someone or entertaining if nothing else. Cheers. We'll see if I do another one. I still don't know. If I do, it won't be another year and a half. Somewhere in all that rambling, there's enough to edit together.